This slide shows the difference in brain development between a child who is typically developing and one who has been through developmental trauma. As you can see, in the brain that is typical developing, cognition takes up the vast majority of the brain space. As you can see with the developmental trauma, a child who's been through developmental trauma, the majority of their brain is consumed by surviving. And you can see that as illustrated in this slide. Their survival mode becomes the most important thing in their world. So if a kid has woken up in the morning and they were up until 3 o'clock last night because their parents were fighting and drinking and their mom and dad are at work and they have to get siblings to school, they are literally consuming most of their brain energy in that survival mode, as opposed to a typically developing child whose brain power is used in the cognition section of their brain. Kids who've been through developmental trauma many times are living indeed in that survival mode of their brain. Stress is a normal part of our lives. There are things that are considered to be positive stress, like me doing this video for the very first time and doing a webcast. Really, that's supposed to be a good kind of stress. Even though my heart is palpitating and I'm breathing a little faster, it's something new, it's something different, and so it's a chance for me to learn something new, but it's absolutely a positive stress factor in my life. Tolerable stress is more severe, but it can be managed. That can lead to serious but temporary stress responses buffered by supportive relationships, the loss of a loved one, financial trouble, all of those kind of things are tolerable stress. Starting a new job is tolerable stress, and it's also positive stress. Then comes toxic stress. Toxic stress is the prolonged stress, and it can disrupt brain development like we saw in the slide previous, leading children who are enduring toxic stress to develop only thinking with the survival part of their brain. It's prolonged stress and can disrupt brain development and has an increase of cognitive impairment, as we talked about in the previous slide. The nervous system is comprised of two different parts, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. Parasympathetic is when our body is at rest, when we're peaceful. Think namaste. Our pupils are fine, our heart beats more slowly, our airways are fine, and we have just a real flow, ebb and flow going on in our nervous system. When toxic situations happen, trauma, things happen in our lives over time, our nervous system can literally shift into functioning in the sympathetic nervous system realm, and that's where pupils are dilated, heart's beating stronger and faster, breathing very quickly. It can change your digestion, and it increases blood flow to skeletal muscles. This is an example of a healthy nervous system. As we talked about before, think namaste. Everything is good in your world, bills are paid, you've gotten enough sleep, you're ready to go, and your sympathetic arousal stays very clearly within those well-defined boundaries of activation and relaxation. And so you're just kind of this nice, even ebb and flow throughout the day in a healthy nervous system. The traumatized nervous system looks like this, and you can see that this is a significant difference than the nice ebb and flow we saw in the last slide. So a traumatic event, you get up for school, mom and dad are yelling at each other, everybody's yelling, everybody's fighting, there's a traumatic event, and all of a sudden you're bouncing between your activation and relaxation of your nervous system. So then you go to school and you hit the on switch, you're ready for the day, but look, you're already outside the boundaries of regulating yourself and your nervous system in the classroom. So you can see that in this traumatized nervous system, this kid is just bouncing all around, and they have an inability to actually regulate between their parasympathetic nervous system and their symptomatic nervous system. They have had traumatic events, they're bouncing in and out of the lines. This looks like a kid who might be responding. The behaviors we see when their nervous system is dysregulated might include anxiety, panic, exaggerated startle reflex, hyperactivity, digestive problems, emotional flooding, hostility, rage, restlessness, inability to relax, hypervigilance, sleeplessness, and chronic pain. Now let's talk about a little bit about the kids on the bottom level here. So this can also look like depression, exhaustion, disconnection, flat affect, chronic fatigue, disassociation, low blood pressure, lethargy, disorientation, complex syndromes, and poor digestion. So do we have any less of an obligation as educators to deal with the kids on the bottom as we do the kids on the top? The kids on the top are going to stand out in the classroom. They're going to be the kids that are out of their seats, that are talking, that are blurting out, that are being disrespectful, that are doing all these things to get our attention. But what about the kid who comes in and just puts his head on his desk and sleeps all period? Do we have an ethical obligation to deal with him too and to see what's going on in his world? Because he is absolutely in the same level of a traumatized nervous system. His behaviors are just looking different than the kid who's acting out. So be mindful and cognizant of the kids who are disengaged, the kids who are sleeping through class, the ones who don't seem to care, who seem aloof. Please know that trauma can manifest in different ways with different kids, and that can absolutely be a red flag as well. Emotional impacts, shutting down, slowing down emotional development, and therefore brain development. That's what can happen when kids go through trauma. Triggers in the environment can keep the person's system activated. I once had a kid who had been through severe abuse, physical and emotional abuse, was sitting in a middle school classroom and smelled the smell of the grandparent who had abused him. And all of a sudden, all of those things came flooding back to him, and he ended up down in the counselor's office telling the counselor horrific stories of abuse that later led to criminal charges against the grandpa. But that happened in a science classroom, all because he smelled something that reminded him of his abuser. So triggers in the environment can keep the person's system activated. Just be very mindful that when kids act a certain way, there's usually something behind that, and we need to keep our responses in check and our responses on a calm level as a model for the kid, no matter what their behavior is, and then we can address the behavior. Activation can lead to a whole cycle of elevating emotions, ramping up, or attempts to avoid the emotions. So as educators, it's our obligation to remain in control and calm no matter what the behaviors that come our way. Then we deal with them when everybody's in a calm space, because kids can get triggered and activated by things that we have no idea that are going to impact and affect them in the way that it does.